Hey, what's up, guys? Dragon back again, here to tell you that you should be watching Shin Godzilla. So, Shin Godzilla, or Shin Godzilla, or Godzilla Resurgence, or the movie that has way too many names, is a 2016 Toho kaiju film directed by Hideki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, and is essentially kind of a retelling, if you will, of the Godzilla mythology. It is the first time in Godzilla's history where 1954, the events of 1954, are not canon. They did not happen. And before you guys say anything, I know some of you are going to be like, well, the 2014 legendary film did not have the events of 1954 take place within that canon. However, in that continuity, Godzilla was first spotted in 1954, was involved with the hydrogen bomb testing in some capacity. He just did not come ashore and destroy Tokyo. But we did first become aware of him in 1954. So that film doesn't so much throw out the 54 continuity, just more, dials it way back, kind of waters it down, but it's still there. Whereas in this film, this is the first time Godzilla has ever been seen. This iteration of Godzilla of any kind. And essentially, this is kind of a landmark film. It is a groundbreaking film. It is one of the first times that, or really the first time that Toho, the parent company of Godzilla, kind of went full CGI in terms of the effects. There were some practical effects in the film, but for the most part, Godzilla himself was brought to life using digital effects. Now, it's not the first time they used digital effects in a Godzilla film, but they've previously been used very sparingly and were hardly the backbone of how they brought the character to life. This time, however, Toho took a very kind of modern day film approach to making this film, making it kind of, again, a groundbreaking film, especially for the Godzilla franchise, kind of following what the 2014 film did in terms of kind of going full CGI, and really following suit, really by combining those two films together, pushing this character really into the modern age of cinema and really rebranding him and introducing him to a much younger audience who, while maybe having grown up hearing about Godzilla films, didn't really take an interest in them, and kind of maybe view them as a passe thing. And in this film, really introduced a new generation to Godzilla while kind of reacclimating an older one to the character. Now, with all that aside, the film basically is, like the original 54 film, an allegory for kind of our mishandling of nuclear energy, whereas in the original film 54, it was essentially kind of a metaphor for the bomb, the atomic bomb, and the hydrogen bomb testing that were going on after World War II. This is more about like our disposal of nuclear waste and kind of our misuse of nuclear technology. But more or less, whereas the original film was some more like Godzilla is more of a response to kind of our entering of the nuclear age, if you will, being a manifestation of the bomb. This film is more about our reaction to Godzilla. It's more about our inability to mobilize and act accordingly due to kind of our being bogged down in politics. And this film is very much a bit of a social commentary as well as a bit of satire on kind of how a lot of like Japanese people view the government. And again, I'm going to be very careful because obviously I'm not a Japanese citizen, so I can't really weigh too heavily in on their politics because ultimately they don't really affect me, and I'm not really super versed in them, and I don't claim to be an expert, so I don't want to say something that could be misinformation or be misconstrued as bias in a weird way. But based on what I've been told and kind of how it has been explained to me from people over there, is that one of the things they kind of get frustrated with their kind of political system is that there's a lot of steps, if you will, for decisions to be made by the government in terms of reacting to a national tragedy. There's a lot of kind of steps and kind of channels that have to be kind of gone through before the government can officially act, and that leads to sometimes frustration with the populace in terms of the reaction time. The other issue is Japan is still viewed as a post-war country, that is post-World War II. And based on the treaty they have signed, they are not allowed to have an offensive military. I don't know if in recent years elements of that have changed. It may have, so again, I'm not going to get too deep into that. But ultimately, they cannot really launch any kind of military assault unless they are directly attacked on their own soil. So a lot of what bogs down this issue, a lot of what results in the government in this film being so slow to react to Godzilla, and what basically giving him the opportunity to just traipse across Tokyo, causing massive amounts of destruction, killing millions of people, is mainly because there are literally just no shortage of meetings going on discussing what they cannot do, and maybe can do. And while they're going through all this, Godzilla is just rampaging around, causing all this destruction. Meanwhile, the people on the ground are dying and losing their homes, being driven out of their homes, wondering, why are you not doing something? We are literally being essentially attacked by a giant monster, and there's nothing happening. No one's doing anything about it. And it cuts back and forth, showing you kind of the frustration of the people with the government, and basically why it can't just react. And there's this great kind of divide between old and young. And in Japan, it is a society, a culture that very much reveres its elders. And a lot of times, elderly statesmen stay in power for the majority of their life, essentially. A lot of them not even stepping down until they pass away. So for a younger generation of politicians to kind of step up and kind of take power and kind of really kind of take control of the government, they essentially have to wait a considerable amount of time. And a lot of times they're kind of forced to be very much subservient to the older generation. So because of that, you see there is a bit of a generation gap. There's a great scene where the older politicians are trying to figure out what's going on, and the younger ones are saying, well, it's already on social media. And the older generation never thought to even think of that, to get eyes on the ground, because they come from a time where no one had, cameras in their pocket, essentially, whereas the younger folks in their 20s and 30s, that was like their first thing. Well, go on YouTube. There's bound to be somebody who's filmed this thing, walking around, and sure enough, there was. And it really isn't until a lot of the older cabinet members are unfortunately killed that it leaves essentially kind of a political vacuum in the government, where a lot of these younger politicians have to now step up because they are essentially the majority of the acting body of the government. So really it is a commentary on how much Japan as a nation's hands are tied. And there's this great moment where they are trying to assess does Godzilla count as a foreign aggressor, because depending on that, they might not even have the kind of political leeway to just attack him, because for them to engage a military assault, they have to make sure that it falls in line with this post-war treaty that they've signed. Otherwise, they're going to be in violation of international law, which is another reason why sometimes they look to the Americans in the film to kind of do some of the dastardly deeds, because quite frankly, in certain cases, the Americans have more leeway to launch an assault on Japanese soil than the Japanese government does, which again leads to a lot of the frustration, saying we can't even protect ourselves. We need to be able to defend ourselves. We need to be able to protect ourselves. So we're not looking to do anything terrible, but if we are attacked, if our citizens are being killed by either a foreign aggressor or just this enormous beast that is essentially a walking natural disaster, we need to be able to take steps to mobilize in a timely fashion to minimize the damage it can cause. So that's really what this film is about. Godzilla is more or less a spotlight that is shown on the current state of Japanese politics, and again, kind of the frustration that comes really on both sides. You see, again, a lot of the politicians are frustrated by this system that they've kind of inherited. Not a lot of them are like what's going on, but their hands are tied. So you see on the one side the people who are getting frustrated by how slow they have to react, and you see the politicians themselves, how frustrated they are by how slow they have to react. That they wish they could just get in there and get the job done, and they just cannot. And as Westerners, it's a very different thing, especially, being an American. I watch films, where if something attacks an American city, whether it be a terrorist, a foreign aggressor, a giant monster, military, saddles up and starts firing rockets, guns, the whole nine yards. We don't have to stop and ask questions and refer to international law to see if we are within our rights. We just, run in there guns blazing. Whereas a nation like Japan does not have that kind of freedom. So for them, if something like this happening on their soil is going to be 10 times more devastating than if it happened in a country that has a lot more political freedom in terms of how they can use their military. They have to, unfortunately, go through all this legislative red tape just to see if they can fire a shot. They have to go through all these different channels of authority to see if they can switch to different caliber weapons, because different kinds of weapons, depending on their power and accuracy, falls under a different guideline versus, just self-defense, national defense versus acts of war. All these different kind of just political potholes that they have to try to avoid just to protect themselves from a giant kaiju. So whereas in the original 54 film, Godzilla was more, again, less the literal manifestation of their greatest nightmare. It's literally the worst thing that has ever happened to them as a nation made flesh. And this film, Godzilla is more or less a catalyst. Godzilla is bad, don't get me wrong. Godzilla does an enormous amount of destruction in this film. However, it's less about him, the creature, and more about, again, the government's inability to react in a timely fashion. And by the time they finally are able to devise a method in which to combat this creature, it has to be done so with the help of foreign aid. It is a collaborative effort. Japan is known for its kind of team-oriented mentality, whereas in America it's very much, the lone action hero, the one man, rippling muscles who can, stop the threat themselves. In Japan, it's a team effort. It's everyone working together. And you see a coalition of nations. You see Japan working with America, France, Germany, all bringing something to the table to bring down Godzilla. And because it is a joint effort, they're not violating any type of international laws. They're working within the boundaries that are put forth by this treaty, and they're able to come to a resolution, a conclusion that kind of works for everybody, both politically and just, sensibly for the people who are still living in Japan, to kind of deal with this threat. So it's more or less a commentary on us, our ability to kind of work together, on our ability to kind of perhaps let certain things go, because there's a great discussion between two of the principal characters in the film where they talk about Japan being a post-World War II country, post-war Japan, and that is kind of why they are having the difficulty they are dealing with this threat directly. And one of the characters says, post-war Japan goes on forever, meaning it's when do we stop being, post-war Japan and just start being Japan? When do we just start being the country that we are, not the country, that's living in the shadow of the country it used to be? We're not that country anymore. We're not those people anymore. And, we're not looking to do anything that remotely resembles what we did as a nation a long time ago. We are just looking to defend ourselves. We're looking to protect our people. The people who voted us into office did so we could have their best interest in mind. And now that we're essentially being, pushed basically in a position where we tend to put our money where our mouth is, we're not able to kind of fulfill our end of the bargain. We're not able to protect them the way we promised them we would. And we need to be able to do that to function as a nation. It's great to have allies. It's great to have people you can call on, lean on, lend you support. But ultimately, you still as a nation have to be able to do the very basics to protect your citizens. And if that's not enough, then you call on for help. But you can't be entirely reliant on somebody else to protect you. You need to be able to function as, a working government on your own first to be able to kind of solve problems. And that's essentially kind of what this movie is saying, is that Japan wants to be able to solve these problems themselves. They don't want to always have to rely on somebody else. Again, they're willing to do so and work together as a team, as they do at the end of the film, but they need to be able to protect the people they are sworn to protect in the moment. Because when Godzilla's first attack happens, his first rampage, one of the characters even say, this thing was on land for like, I think it was like, it might have been like 45 minutes or it could have been a few hours. I can't remember. I know there was a 4 somewhere in there, so I apologize. And we did nothing. What did we do in that time? This thing did all this destruction, and what did we do in that time? We did nothing. We did nothing. We didn't react fast enough. How many people died while we were going in and out of meetings, essentially? And that is kind of the voice of the younger politicians who are basically saying, like, times need to change. Times do change, and we need to change with them. And this crisis is an example of how the way we've been doing things just doesn't work anymore. And it's a call to change, and it's a call to action. So it is a film that did exceptionally well in Japan. It is one of the highest grossing Japanese films of all time. It was nominated for a slew of Japanese Academy Awards and won every single one, including Best Picture. But it was a it was a film that really celebrated this Japanese self-defense force. It did not paint the government. Sorry, by the way, for the coughing. It's got a very dry. I feel like I have really dry throats when I do things. I need to have like cough drops all the time. But it was a film that really celebrated all these governing bodies coming together and working as they should. It wasn't painting the government in a negative light in the sense that the government is doomed to be ineffectual. It's saying the government can accomplish great things if it is allowed to do what it needs to do, and all these other different nations of the world set their differences aside and work together. And one of the things Godzilla's always been kind of famous for is kind of working as a great equalizer. We are all equal in Godzilla's shadow. It doesn't matter if you're a superpower or a third world country, Godzilla will lay waste to you regardless. So it was great seeing all these countries kind of coming together and working together with Japan, because they realized that we all stand to lose the same thing. Godzilla's not going to just stop the Japan. This creature is going to just march across the world and just keep destroying everything in its path. And because of that, it brought a lot of people together and forced a lot of people to work together and figure out creative solutions around the problem, where no one was trying to be the hero, no one was trying to be number one. Everyone was just working for a shared common goal. And the film, that's the other side of this film, is that it shows what happens when we all work together and all do what we honestly should do. We don't let pride or ego get in the way, but we actually just kind of function as a unit, as a well-oiled machine, and surprise, surprise, we get something done. And we save lives. So, that's pretty much Shin Godzilla in a nutshell. It is a film that is very much a mirror on ourselves. It's a film that forces us to take a look at ourselves, and it is a film that for Japanese people really kind of gave them a voice. It is a film that kind of expressed on screen a lot of their concerns, fears, and frustrations. I mean, art has always been a great medium to kind of communicate, the things that bother us, the things that trouble us, the things that keep us up at night. And this film was a voice of a nation. Again, and because of that, it was so well received, and it was a bit of kind of a public catharsis where, again, people were happy that, okay, it's not just me. This film is expressing the things that I feel that I can't express, or that if I do, my voice won't get far enough. But this movie is taking that fear, that concern, that frustration, and spreading it across the world. And now the world is listening to us. The world is looking at something that perhaps never even really gave much of a thought to, and looking at it more closely, because we used entertainment to kind of, get a message across. Entertainment kind of works a bit as a Trojan horse too. No one really likes to listen to someone just preach at you. But if you're entertained, you can put in a message, and people don't mind hearing a message. And because while you're teaching them something, you're also entertaining them. So as long as people walk away entertained, they don't mind having learned something. So this film does a great job of really kind of, again, expressing just kind of the mindset of what Japanese people kind of think of this current kind of political climate, if you will. And again, does a great job of not vilifying the government, but showing what the government can accomplish when it is allowed to just do what it's supposed to do and when everybody works together. So, with all that said, Shin Godzilla, I highly recommend it. And for all of those of you who have seen it, please give me some of your thoughts. Obviously, big Godzilla fan on this channel. This one is a more recent film, and it is a film that has made a big impact on not just the Godzilla franchise, but just the kaiju genre in general. So definitely let me know what some of your guys' thoughts were about the film. For those of you guys who have not seen the film, I will leave a link in the description section below where you can go pick it up, check it out, come back, give me some of your thoughts. I'll be very curious to see what you guys think, especially if this is your first Godzilla movie. It's a very interesting one to start with, but a damn good one to start with. So definitely come back, let me know what you guys think, because I'm always curious to know, how people react who are not familiar with, these kinds of movies, kind of what their takeaway is at the first time they see it. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Just quick reminder, we are on Patreon now. So if you like this content, these kind of videos, we're going to be putting a lot of this stuff up early on Patreon, in addition to some more exclusive stuff that we're going to be doing on there for backers specifically. But anyway, guys, head over there, check it out. We'll have a link for that in the description section below. And as always, catch you in the next one. Peace!